Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another weekly fighting roundup. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like video if you do indeed like video, and let's get straight into it. So this week probably must be the most boring week boxing wise around, because you're building up to the fight with Opetaya and Yika. That is the kind of first big fight of the year. The last kind of fight of the year, which was a world title fight in Ioka versus Martinez, was cancelled through Martinez getting an injury. So not really much has happened, to be completely honest. I thought I would come on here and, of course, do the videos in which I always do. But like I said, there's really not much that's happened. And in general, you're kind of course, running off the high of Fury versus Usyk at the end of last year. And then you're just kind of getting into the couple of weeks in which there's not really too much happening. But it seems like the UFC is back next week as well, and so things are getting going after this week. But, of course, there was little bits of news, kind of fights being announced and different things that have happened, so I thought I would come on and, say just what's happened. So, starting off, of course, like I say, Ioka and Martinez, that fight was cancelled, which is a shame. Ioka, yet again, trying to fight on New Year's Day, New Year's Eve, sorry, but, of course, that didn't end up happening this time. But Martinez, I'm sure he probably will end up fighting Ioka again at some point. He will just have to get back to it, I suppose. Akhmedov will fight Jones January 17th. Sandoval will fight Bernaldez February 21st. Mercado will fight Villanueva February 7th. Bermeta versus Serbo. Khan versus Griffiths. Hickford, Fetty, Zarmatkesh, Payne and Huntley will fight January 11th. Clark, Birchall and Brown will fight March 15th. Gaia has unfortunately passed away. He was I believe, Tanzania boxer, and it seems like most weeks I'm kind of talking about a fighter who unfortunately has passed away, and this was again suffering brain injuries, this time off of a knockout. And last week I believe it was Paul Bamba, and this week, of course, another fighter. It's really sad to see. Again, it's the sport showing the dangerous side of it, showing that you can't go in half-assing it, or you can't go in without the right precautions being made. You kind of have to look at the promoters, the people putting on these events, and be like, should these people have licenses to put on events? Even though they are in countries in which perhaps are, lesser, got lesser wealth, should they be allowed to put on the events? Because if things like this are happening, the right precautions aren't being taken with the hospitals and the doctors and all the necessary things, it's kind of just bordering into white collar then. And white collar has had a lot of instances as well in which fighters in which have unfortunately passed away. And so it's just another debate, I suppose. Hearn has said Joshua will fight in May or June, so it seems like the return of Anthony Joshua will be perhaps a little bit sooner, in which people are expecting. Who it will be against, not a clue, to be honest. I mean, it could be against Bacoli in Africa. That could make for a good fight. It could be, it won't be the Dubois rematch. I don't think the Fury fight would get turned around that quickly. Perhaps they're just saying a date to keep Joshua's name kind of in and amongst the fans' names or fans' words. But I don't know. I just don't know if I see it actually happening in May time. Perhaps we'll see. Forrest will fight Miller January 11th. Welland will fight Rama Belester February 9th. Warren has commenced legal action against Eubank Jr. That is after the comments in which Eubank Jr. said in the press conference ahead of his last fight. I mean, Frank Warren has been often known to sue a lot of fighters, and we'll probably not hear about what actually happens, but it's interesting to see. Again, kind of shuts out any type of work between Eubank and Warren anytime soon, most likely. Anton will fight Crail January 17th. Biswana and Power will fight March 15th. Canelo is in talks to fight Skull. Canelo, with very limited options, is seemingly, in talks to fight a few guys, but Skull is one of them, and I suppose perhaps when you look at the names in which are available to him, I've talked about this before, but Iglesias, Mbili, Plant again, Pacheco, there isn't too many other names in which you're really looking at, to be completely honest. I mean, like I've mentioned, the Crawford fight I don't think will happen. The Bivol rematch I don't think will happen. Beterbiev I don't think will happen. Skull I suppose makes sense. You know, he is a world champion now. He is a much lesser name than the ones in which I have listed, and probably won't sell that well. And to be honest, he's not a very entertaining fighter for the fans. A lot of fans were not really too keen on his last performance, and so perhaps we'll see Skull versus Canelo, but it will literally just be for the belt purposes. Bourne has joined Queensbury. Lara will fight Davila January 31st. Gualtieri will fight Pavlov February 15th. Mercado is set to fight Pedraza January 25th. Queensbury is aiming to do a global show in 2025. This has been kind of rumoured and talked about for a little while, kind of behind the scenes, but it is expected, or it was expected, with the international talent in which Frank Warren has been signing with the likes of Lee, has a good name, Brandon Lee. He's a very good name, a very good American name, and of course Frank Warren in the past has done previous events around the world, and he's used to being that global kind of promoter. But it's been a long time since that's been the case, and of course he's got other fighters like Zhang as well. So it would be interesting to see who he goes for a global event, because a lot of his, I suppose, global fighters are just fighting on Riyadh season cards at the moment. So who he could go to headline a global event, I'm not too sure, but we'll have to wait and see. It's just interesting to see, Frank Warren going back, wanting to get back in the big global scene, which would be again competing against Matchroom. Warren has said Queensbury will do a 5v5 versus Matchroom, a second one in May. It's pretty much been said. The hype's going to get built. I'm excited for it, and it's glad to see that it's seemingly a lot easily to be made, I suppose, than the first time. And I'm sure there'll be some more good fights, and hopefully Matchroom will actually be able to pick up a win. We'll have to see which names in which they choose. Haney has said he's fighting in March, the return of Devin Haney, and who he could be fighting again, and nobody really knows. He says he's fighting in March. There's been no announcement yet. You'd like to think, at the scale of a fight of Devin Haney, he will have an announcement soon. Do people really care about him making a return? Before the Ryan Garcia fight, he was a very big name, and he was really kind of riding a big high. I believe he was 30-0, 31-0, undisputed champion, really a big name in the sport. Now that hype's kind of dropped off a bit, even though it hasn't been counted as a loss, the hype still has dropped off, and perhaps people are thinking he's been exposed, so he's going to have to really come back and make a statement performance. But which opponent does he choose to do that? Does he choose to go in against a top level guy and really make a statement performance? Or does he go in against a bit of a lesser guy who perhaps has the ranking but isn't going to bring the same amount of attention? We'll have to wait and see. Davis versus Borincic and Anderson are set to fight February 14th. So that, is a great fight, Davis versus Borincic, and I'm very excited for that one if it does get announced and it does happen. Davis actually taking a big step up in this one. And Anderson, the return of Jared Anderson after the Bicoli fight, in which, of course, was a step too far too soon for him. I still think he is a good heavyweight and able to get back to a high level, but it's just at what point, and we'll have to wait and see who he's against. I'm sure it won't be a that crazy high level of opponent because of the fact in which, of course, he had quite a bad loss. He has to rebuild, but it's nice to see him coming back, I suppose. Ennis is in talks with Stanionis. If you aren't a boxing, if you're, from the boxing perspective, that's a bit less of a, I suppose, ultra fan, just somebody who's looking from the outside. You think this is a boring fight, not a fight of a big name, not somebody who's really that interesting. But I think this is an excellent fight. Stanionis has been looking brilliant in his past performances. Yes, they haven't been, I suppose, a crazy high level opposition, but to be honest, when you look at Ennis's last fights, the last two especially, haven't been against, stupidly high opposition either. They've been world ranked fighters, but so have Stanionis's. So I think, two world champions, it's about time that we're actually getting unifications. Stanionis is a very underrated fighter, and I would really like to see this fight happen. With Ennis, pretty much all of his talks are falling through at the moment with anybody that he's trying to fight, so will that happen? I'm not too sure, but hopefully, fingers crossed, it will happen. Matias is in talks to fight Rodriguez as a backup fighter for the Lopez fight, so Teofimo Lopez is seemingly fuming, to be completely honest. He's meant to be in talks to fight Matias. That was seemingly going to go ahead in March time. I believe March 20th was the date in which they were looking at. Now he's talking about what's the buyout clause for him to be able to leave top as a top ranked fighter. He's obviously always had these kind of things about him in which perhaps things haven't always gone smoothly in his career. Perhaps he's a bit difficult to work with, I'm not too sure. But it seemed like this fight was very much locked in, and now it's seemingly kind of gone a bit. And Rodriguez is not a bad opponent to come in as a backup opponent, somebody who only has the one defeat on his record a little bit earlier on in his career against a tough opponent. And so, it would still make for a good fight. Nowhere near the level for, Matthias in which Lopez is, and I'm sure Matthias would be annoyed just as much so as Lopez if the fight doesn't happen. But yeah, it's just interesting to see what's going on with Lopez at the moment. Is this something in which is his fault, or is it something that's his promoter's fault? Well, I'm not too sure, and I'm not too sure if we'll ever find out. Moving on now to the MMA news. There is very little MMA news. There is not many big events that's actually happened, so just kind of fight news. Carrillo will fight Anana January 24th. That is because Superlek is out due to an injury. Qatar is set to fight Zalal February 15th. Gastelum is set to fight Pyford, March 29th. I'm actually a fan of that fight, so I do hope it goes ahead. Velasquez has joined American Kickboxing Academy as a coach. It's great to see that he has been released, and it's great to see that he's able to work back in the MMA scene again, and I'm sure he's able to pass on his wisdom, his knowledge as the great fighter in which he was to the next generation. But yeah, like I say, there's really not been too much news. It's probably the shortest weekly fighting roundup in which I've ever done. But hope you did enjoy. It'll probably be a bit busier next week with a couple of good events happening. So yeah, hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you didn't need like the video. Subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.